3 heart attacks almost killed the king of horror metal. But what brought him back was stranger than any song he ever sang. He didn't just survive. He came back stronger and more terrifying than ever. This is the story of a man who turned darkness into his religion, pain into power, and nearly lost everything because of it. But to understand his darkest moment, you need to know where it all began. Copenhagen, 1956. A quiet boy named Kim Bendix Peterson was born into a normal working-class family. His father worked in a factory, his mother was a government secretary. They lived in a small apartment on the edge of the city. Nothing seemed unusual. Nothing suggested that this blonde-haired kid would one day become one of the most feared voices in metal history. But inside his head, a storm was already brewing. While other kids dreamed about being firefighters, young Kim was obsessed with something different. Death. Not in a scary way, but in a curious way. He saw death as a doorway to something greater. He would sit in his tiny room after everyone went to sleep, playing Black Sabbath and Deep Purple records until sunrise. He watched old horror movies from the 1920s, the silent black and white ones that gave people nightmares. Films like Nosferatu and Dracula became his closest friends. His parents didn't understand him. His teachers worried when they saw him drawing skulls in his notebooks instead of paying attention. His classmates kept their distance because he was different. He didn't fit in anywhere, but that loneliness fed the fire inside him. Kim started wandering through the cemetery near his house, walking between old gravestones like he was searching for answers nobody else thought to ask. He collected books about the occult and spirits. To everyone else, he looked strange, but to himself, he was building an identity. Music wasn't just a hobby, it was his destiny, his escape from a boring world. By the 1970s, Kim wasn't just listening anymore. He picked up a guitar and started singing. His voice was unusual from the start, high-pitched and piercing, like nothing anyone had heard before. He joined his first band called Brainstorm, but something was missing. He needed to become something bigger, something that couldn't be crushed. That's when he chose the name King Diamond. It wasn't just a stage name. It was a declaration, a king with an inhuman voice, a painted face, and a mission to tell stories that terrified everyone else. But becoming an icon meant learning to live with loneliness. It meant paying the price for being different. The early 1980s were explosive for heavy metal. In Copenhagen, Kim, now King Diamond, met guitarist Hank Sherman. Hank wanted to conquer the world with music. King wanted to explore the dark corners of the human soul through sound. These opposites formed a band called Mercyful Fate. In 1983, they released Melissa, and it hit the metal world like a bomb. Songs like Evil and Black Funeral shocked everyone. The lyrics talked about Satan, curses, and darkness. But King wasn't singing for shock value. He was singing about freedom, about breaking free from control, about being an outcast in a world that forced everyone into the same box. His falsetto voice cut through the air like a knife, while Hank's guitars twisted into patterns nobody had heard before. It was beautiful and terrifying at once. A year later in 1984, they released Don't Break the Oath, pushing everything further. King used inverted crosses on stage. He sang about sacrifice and rebellion. His performances felt like dark religious ceremonies. The backlash came hard. In America, the Perk labeled him dangerous for young people. Concerts got canceled. Magazines refused interviews. Religious groups protested. But King didn't back down. To him, Satan wasn't about evil. It was a symbol of individual freedom, of speaking truths others feared to say. This made him a target, but also a legend. Inside the band, trouble was brewing. As Mercyful Fate grew famous, Hank wanted commercial success. King wanted to go deeper into the spiritual and theatrical. Their visions crashed. By the end of 1984, the band split. Many thought this was the end. But for King Diamond, it was just the first sacrifice. In 1985, King didn't disappear. He went into the shadows to prepare for rebirth. He formed a new band named after himself, King Diamond. This was his personal universe now. He teamed up with Swedish guitarist Andy LaRocque and drummer Mickey D, creating something unprecedented. His first album Fatal Portrait came in 1986, introducing real storytelling through music. Half the album told one story about a tortured soul trapped inside a painting. People who accused him of shock tactics were silenced. There was real depth here. But that was just the beginning. A year later in 1987 came Abigail, the album that carved his name into metal history forever. This told a complete gothic horror story set in the 18th century about a couple who moved into a mansion haunted by the spirit of their unborn child. Every song was a chapter in this cursed tale. The album opened with galloping horses and mournful guitar riffs. Each song wasn't just music, it was summoning spirits through sound. On stage, King recreated this world completely. Real coffins, candles, fake blood, and dolls representing Abigail. His microphone was shaped like a human bone. His face painted in black and white corpse paint. These weren't concerts, they were rituals. The audience stood between theater and reality, between fear and fascination. Abigail became the defining masterpiece of horror metal. Critics praised it, fans worshipped it. One of the greatest concept albums of the 1980s. King kept expanding his dark universe with them in 1988 and Conspiracy in 1989. These albums formed one continuous story about a boy and his grandmother in a haunted house. Beneath the horror were meanings about psychological manipulation, about how people strip away your free will. By Conspiracy, the main character was locked in an asylum, and listeners realized King used horror to talk about real human alienation, loneliness, and isolation. In 1990, the act closed this golden era. This tackled religious history and crimes hidden behind the cross, through a witch's mystical eye-seeing into the past. The album exposed torture done in the name of faith. The music blended church bells, choirs, and sharp guitars into an accusation of religious hypocrisy. But behind the success, cracks formed. Band members kept leaving. Endless tours drained his health. Record labels pushed him to write radio-friendly songs. But King never gave in. Every time someone asked him to simplify, he responded with something darker. Real art doesn't bow to the world. It stays loyal to the darkness within. The success made King Diamond a legend, but behind the spotlight were fractures. In 1987, guitarist Michael Denner left mid-tour. The endless schedule crushed everyone. After the in 1990, King decided not to tour. Fans were shocked, but inside, everyone knew it was necessary. The pressure had drained them completely. King never rested long though. In 1992, he reunited with the original Mercyful Fate members after nearly a decade. This wasn't nostalgia, it was redemption. From then on, King entered the busiest phase of his life, leading to bands simultaneously. King Diamond and Mercyful Fate, 2 tour schedules, 2 creative universes. This devotion came at a steep price. Every tour pushed his physical limits. Every recording tested vocal cords worn from thousands of hours of falsetto singing. The strain led to constant lineup changes and tension, but King remained the guiding force for his bands and an entire generation of metal musicians. In 1999, something unforgettable proved his influence. King Diamond joined Metallica on stage in Milan to perform Evil. The crowd went insane. James Hetfield bowed to him on stage. History coming full circle. From dark Copenhagen basements to the biggest stages on Earth, King Diamond became not just an icon, but the source. As the new century began, King returned to his self-titled band. Time hadn't softened his voice, it deepened it. In 2002, he released Abigail to the Revenge, a sequel to his masterpiece. In 2003 came The Puppet Master, a love story about souls turned into wooden puppets in a haunted theater. His young wife Livia Zeta lent her voice for the first time. The contrast between their tones, his piercing and hers warm, created a haunting atmosphere, as if their love was being told through sound. In 2007, Give Me Your Soul Please closed a monumental decade. The opening track Nevending Hill earned his first Grammy nomination for Best Metal Performance. For an artist once branded satanic, mainstream recognition proved how far he transcended prejudice. But his body began betraying him. Years of touring brutally damaged his spine. A herniated disc forced him to cancel an entire US tour. The pain haunted him for months. Then in 2010, on a cold winter night, King Diamond nearly died. Doctors discovered 3 blocked arteries and rushed him into triple bypass heart surgery. When he emerged, fans barely recognized the man who once commanded stages. The thunderous voice became a faint breath. His body was frail and ghost-like. But he survived. And for King Diamond, survival wasn't luck, it was resurrection. After surgery, many believed he'd never perform again. But surrender wasn't in his nature. Just 2 years later in 2012, he appeared at Sweden Rock Festival. Tens of thousands roared when he walked on stage. He was thin, pale, still recovering, but he stood under the lights with his face painted, and his falsetto cut through the night as if death itself had failed to silence him. It wasn't just a comeback, it was resurrection. Throughout the 2010s, King became a recurring festival guest. In 2013, he lent his voice to Volby at Song Room 24, earning another Grammy nomination. In 2015, Abigail was inducted into the Decibel Hall of Fame, but behind the accolades, he battled his own body. Shows cancelled due to back pain, nights singing through exhaustion, but King never withdrew. For him, the stage wasn't a place to perform, it was a place to survive. From 2018 onward, King announced his 13th album, St. Lucifer's Hospital 1920, his most ambitious vision since Abigail, set in a 20th century mental asylum where humanity and evil merge. In 2019, the first single, Masquerade of Madness, was unveiled, a haunting fusion of classic King Diamond with modern edge. Manic laughter and screeching guitars, like unraveling sanity. That year, he toured North America, proving that while time steals strength, it couldn't extinguish the fire. At an age when most legends retire, King Diamond continues performing, not for glory, but to fulfill an unfinished vow. In 2024, he launched the St. Lucifer's Hospital Tour, his most ambitious theatrical project since Abigail. The stage transformed into an early 20th century asylum with rusted iron beds, cold surgical lights, and masked nurses behind white curtains. King appeared in a patient's gown, gripping his bone microphone, surrounded by electric shock sounds and artificial heartbeats. A ritual of survival, turning his medical pain into art. The setlist featured Spider Lully and electrotherapy. The first, a haunting ballad evoking his hospital bed confinement. The second, its violent twin, recreating asylum shock treatments. Both were unspoken autobiographies. In December 2024, Spider Lully was released. Critics hailed it as a requiem for King Diamond himself, praising its gothic, progressive, mournful melodies. A lullaby for a man at death's door. By 2025, King toured Europe with Paradise Lost, Angel Witch, and Unto Others. Within 48 hours, every ticket sold out. No advertising, just whispers among the faithful. At the final Prague show, the audience fell silent as King paused mid-performance. He looked up toward the ceiling, voice quiet but steady, and said something chilling. "I will not die before I finish this story." Not a challenge, a vow. Looking back on nearly half a century, King Diamond stands for more than horror metal. It embodies a philosophy of art and freedom. He turned stages into chapels, albums into rituals, darkness into the language of the soul. In a genre worshipping power and screams, he chose intellect and emotion, telling stories where darkness wasn't the enemy, but the mirror reflecting humanity's fears. His influence extends far beyond music. Metallica, Ghost, Opeth, and Cradle of Filth all cite him as inspiration, not just for his falsetto, but for weaving entire worlds from sound. He created concept horror metal, where each album was a complete story with characters and plotlines like Gothic novels. What sets King Diamond apart is he never tried to be understood, only truthful. For 40 years, he lived quietly. No social media, no scandals, no flaunting fame. When asked why he never plans to retire, he simply smiled and said, "Because when the music stops, so do I." From a Danish boy haunted by shadows, King Diamond completed the circle, singing about death to speak of life, using the devil's image to rediscover humanity, singing with the demon's voice to remind the world that even in hell there is light. Drop a comment if you've ever felt like an outsider and found your voice through music.